Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Radio and the Drum, the podcast where we feature those that have experienced success in business and in life despite having this little thing we call ADHD. I'm your host, Mikel Abador, and I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. He was one of the first people that when we started thinking about this project that I wanted on the show, we met, we became fast friends. We both realized we had a lot in common, and one of those things is we are ADHDers. And at this point in our life, we're running towards it, not against it. So I'm so excited to introduce a prolific venture business builder, fellow ADHD entrepreneur, and a fly fisherman, which is dear to my old heart. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. JT Benton. JT.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am honored, man. I'm honored. And I'm just happy that you're hanging out with us and not, like spinning some knots and getting ready for fly fishing. You're spending your afternoon with us.
And thrilled to be here. Honored is definitely the word. I think what you're working on here and the stories you're helping people to tell are going to help a lot of people. So just absolutely honored to be a part of it. Thank you, Mikel.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate that. Well,
yeah.
I want to get, if we could jump right into it, I want to know what it was like to grow up as JT. Because I know the guy now, the guy who's killing it in the venture space, but there was a time when you're just trying to figure life out. Can you take us all the way back to growing up, man? What was it like growing up where you grew up in your house? All the gooey stories that we want to hear.
Yeah, growing up was awesome. It was great. I'm able to say that now because the things that were real challenges and sort of headwinds were overcome through a lot of support and a lot of love from my family and the village of people that they assembled around me to feel like family and act as family. I grew up in Arizona. My parents are both entrepreneurs. I think we discovered that I had ADHD in first or second grade. That was kind of a jarring moment because it caused some disruption in my education and how we would kind of handle my upbringing a little bit, or how they would handle my upbringing. But my hat's off to my folks and my family who really supported me and the great educators that they put me in front of. One of the kind of most common threads, and since you mentioned it, in my childhood and my adulthood has been fishing and nature in general. I think, there wasn't a lot of great research out on ADHD early on, but my folks were observant enough to understand that I was really at my best if I had a lot of space around me and if I was out in nature. And so that meant summer camp. It meant a lot of camping trips, hunting and fishing, and just a lot of time spent outdoors, which has really been a common thread for me throughout. Whenever things get too tough or too stressful for me, getting outside has always been one of the things that I've leaned on. But yeah, I grew up in Phoenix, went to college in the Midwest, a very cool little liberal arts college called DePauw University. Go Tigers. And after school, have sampled a whole bunch of different industries and work modalities to kind of land on the right kind of difficult for me, the kinds of things that I enjoy doing most, no matter how hard they are. And I've just been very fortunate throughout that, the adult part of my childhood, because I'm still very much a kid, to partner really well with people who have skill sets and superpowers that are different and uniquely different than my own.
Well, I know something that you and we both align on a lot of things, but this is one is ADHD as a superpower, running into it versus running, away from it and really leveraging the superpowers, the talents that it provides, not believing what other people are telling you that you don't have talents or you're not good at these things. But before we get there, that took me years to understand. It probably did you too. You said you were in first and second grade. Did you always believe that ADHD was a superpower, or walk us through kind of those years that were a little challenging?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't called ADHD then. It was called ADD, attention deficit disorder. So, man, you'd have to be one heck of an optimist or a narcissist to hear the word disorder and go, yeah, that's right. Label me with that, right? I'd like to wear that on the front of my t-shirt. So yeah, it was very jarring and actually a little traumatic in retrospect to learn that I wasn't like the other kids, so to speak. And the way that it manifested was like I just couldn't get anything done. We would get these calls home from school. Your son hasn't turned in any of his homework all semester and he's going to fail. Or we just can't keep this kid focused in class. He's a disruption. He's constantly getting up and, asking to go to the bathroom. Even if I didn't have to go to the bathroom, I just go walk around the halls. Still to this day, like I can't, I'll probably stand up in this meeting, or in this podcast. I just, have always been antsy and full of energy, prone to interrupting, right? And just an idea enters head, idea leaves mouth without any sort of governor or check on it. Those are still issues. But when you're younger, to answer your question, when you're younger, you tend to take that as like critical. You're not enough. You are less than these other kids. And you don't have the context at that point in time to see around the challenges and to see what adults who thrive with ADHD or maybe just neurodivergency, what they're able to accomplish. And so, yeah, there were some definitely sort of like confidence shaking moments in that process.
Yeah, we talked offline, I know about this, but one of the consistencies we've had is people that are successful like yourself, going back into those moments where they'd call your name or the intercom and say, hey, Nikolai or JT, we got to bring you into the special needs room. That whole thing, as helpful as it was, and I don't want to discount how helpful. I don't think I ever would have graduated high school without it.
Mm-hmm.
But you talk jarring. I still remember it when
Mm-hmm.
I was called to it, and I knew what period it was, and it was me and people with actual physical, disabilities. Some couldn't see, some couldn't walk, so on and so forth. And then here I am, going with them. That was hard because to me felt like, okay, when my name is called, no matter what I'd accomplished that day, all my peers and classmates now go, oh, there goes the dum-dum, little snickering, little side teasing. Did you experience that as well?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I did. I got called, my parents got called and said, hey, we want to have a meeting at school. We went to the principal's office and they said, we're gonna move JT to the special education unit. And that unit was a series of trailers. I think some of them had air conditioning, but not all of them, kind of off to the back of the school where the special needs kids were. And my folks were like, hold on, what? And they said, yeah, he can't read. And my dad, this was really fortunate. We had a Volkswagen camper van, was like the family car. And we would take all these family road trips. Those were our vacations. And I had a bunch of fishing magazines in the van. So my dad was like, I'll be right back. And so he ran out to the car and he brought back a copy of In Fisherman, and asked me to read it. And so I read it. And then he asked me questions about my cognition. And, I could tell him, I told the principal everything that I learned about the article, and then a bunch of other things that I had learned from other things. And the principal just had this deadpan look on his face, like, okay, well, he can read, but he doesn't read the books we give him. And so my parents were like, well, show me the books you're giving him. Because I sure as heck wasn't bringing them home. And they didn't have any words. They were just like, they were made for kids who couldn't read, and they enforced that they couldn't read because there was nothing to read. And so my folks were like, okay, look, you're not going to put our kid in special ed. We're going to take him to a specialist. And I was diagnosed with ADD. And my folks found a school called the Awakening Seed School in Phoenix, which I later served on the board of. It's a fantastic school. It's not just for kids with ADHD. It's for, great people. But the class sizes were small, and they kind of within reason didn't care what I worked on as long as I was deploying my curiosity towards something. So like one of the projects I did was I built a a brochure for a fishing school that I was going to run. And, like I just did all these things that were like fun for me that caused me to learn as a forcing function because my curiosity aligned with them.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. So yeah, the special needs thing for sure. That was really tough. It stays with you forever. Like I'll never not hear it. Right. If I hear that, if I discover that we're behind on a task or that something didn't get done, it immediately takes me back to that place. Like, oh man, Junior dropped the ball again. Right. And so, that there's always going to be that insecurity. Fortunately, I've learned to cope with it, and it's driven me to do a lot of things and to have found some success in my life. But yeah.
Well, being on the other side of that, because we've yet to have a guest on here, and I know myself as host, but as much of a listener, this is as much therapy as it is for me as it is hopefully our listeners, and we've heard that from folks. But what is true about ADHD? Like, what are there's all these misconceptions, and we're I'm grateful to be in a time where we're having conversations like this. Whereas in high school, in elementary school, and I didn't get diagnosed till I was 25, so I always thought I was weird, and I barely graduated high school, got into college, thank the Lord, and then graduated that. But the whole time it was like, why is this so hard for me and not for them? Like the kids that were out, partying the day before a test, and I'm like, I have to study, all night long if I even have a prayer at passing this. But we're both on the other side of this. So for someone younger listening, like, what are the biggest misconceptions, or what are they right about? Like, what is right about ADHD that maybe stereotypes are out there, and what are people wrong about it?
Yeah, I think they're wrong about it being a disorder. Like if I was gonna go die on a hill over something that affects this community, it would be to recharacterize these attributes as something other than a disorder. And like I would just point at all the really successful people out there who have this quote unquote disorder and say like, okay, if the common thread is this thing and it's driving so many people to be successful, once they leave the you must live in the box kind of infrastructure of school, or wherever they work or whatever, or maybe even their family, they can go off and do great things. So let's set them up for success by rebranding it, right? That might be a thing. I think lots of folks are wrong about. I don't think it's a deficit either. I think it's a budget issue, right? It's attention budgeting disorder, or it's attention surplus disorder, or it's some other thing. But like, I have lots of attention, and I will deploy it on things that are interesting to me. And like, if I'm curious about something, you can't get me off that topic. I picked up a fishing rod when I was like 6, and like my whole world has been like, I wake up in the morning and I go to bed at night thinking about fish and fishing. Does that sound like I have an attention deficit? Probably not, right? So I don't think I think it's more of a like controlling, how you can focus your attention. So I think folks are wrong about that too. And then, anybody out there who thinks that people with ADD or ADHD are somehow operating at a lesser brain capacity, is misunderstanding it. I think that it is not that at all. The way I would characterize my brain chemistry, and certainly my kids, is, and almost everyone I know who tells me they have ADHD, is that your brain is kind of like a race car without brakes. And so it's difficult to control the things that you apply it to. And those are the lessons that those are the things that we have to learn and how to overcome so that we can focus our energy appropriately on the tasks at hand.
When did you truly learn how to manage it? I mean, was it in your youth, or was it just a couple of weeks ago? Because I've kind of heard both, where some people like, because I guess you're one of the guests that learned early on. And we've had a lot of guests. I mean, a guest that we had recently is 61 years old, listened to an episode of this podcast and said, I think I have it. And then started going back and like, is that why I'm dyslexic? Is that why this? Is that why that? And we had like that really unraveling. I was pleasantly surprised and shocked, like at the same time, to say he heard something that made him dig into it and realize, yeah, this is something that I struggle with. So he's just learning how to manage it as of right now, but you've had a little bit longer
Yeah.
time.
Um, all right. So I'm going to answer this in a way that I would encourage everybody to think about, like answering this question, which is I'm still learning how to manage it, and that's okay. So, I mean, certainly I've gotten better over the years at managing it. But there are certainly like flare ups in my life today that I correlate to ADHD that I have to learn how to manage as I load more sort of tension on the wire, more responsibilities, more things that I'm accountable for. I have to constantly relearn how to manage those things, and so it's an ongoing journey. Um, when I started to have more agency over the things I would spend my time on, it got a lot better. So when I left high school, and it wasn't about like, did you get your, did you take all the classes you need to graduate high school, and did you score well on the standardized test, and did you show up for fifth period when fifth period starts and all that stuff? It got better. And so college was amazing for me. First of all, I went to a liberal arts college. So it was like, yeah, you have your major and there's some requirements, but we're going to teach you how to learn and how to think as opposed to how to be a economist or be a, whatever, whatever vocation. And so that was like huge for me, was when I could actually, it was interesting. People say that people with ADD don't manage their time well, but things got easier for me when I had agency over my time, and how I would spend it. So I could choose to study things that were interesting to me, and then I could later choose to do work that was fulfilling for me. Right. So early in my career, that was sales. A lot of ADD people, not all of them, a lot of them are pretty social, and so in fact, like uncontrollably so. This is true with both of my boys. Like the feedback we get is like, your kid, everybody loves him, but like they're paying more attention to him than they are the teacher, because they're like cracking jokes and like telling stories and like, holding court. So first of all, like when I hear that, I'm like, good. That's great news, right? That is great news. I'm not trying to raise my children to be people who will sit in a room and listen to others all day. Like it's
Right.
not what I'm hoping for here. Um, but like, work for me, allowed me to like sort of chart a course in my career where I could align what I would do to make money with things that I was passionate and curious about. And then it got better, right? And then there's like some simple like blocking and tackling tools. Like I use my calendar as a North Star, right? I stack in everything that has to get done into my calendar, and a series of like productivity tools that my partners have helped me to find, so that I write all the things down that need to happen, and I organize them in such a way that it reduces the stress, right? So I've got a couple big deadlines coming up. We're launching something really cool. Um, and like, if I don't write down and itemize all the things that have to get done, they just sit in my mind like, oh gosh, there's so much to do. I'm not going to make it. Right. And so, writing it down, and by the way, having partners who encourage you and kind of enforce that, is obviously very helpful as well.
So did you find like, well, actually, what did you study specifically in college, and what was your percentage of I'm interested in this and I'm not interested in that? Because I know for me, once I got past my generals, which I'm so thankful that I got through, because it was basically
Hmm.
just an extension of high school courses that I didn't care about.
Hmm.
But then I got into
Yeah.
marketing, and I'm like, oh, there's an interest here, to your point, and I got involved in booking music and playing music in college, and I would work around the clock. So you're right. It had nothing to do with time that I was willing to
Yeah.
put into something. I just was interested in it. But that didn't happen till it's
Till
probably
later.
20. How about you?
Happened right when I got to DePaul.
Right
Um,
away?
yeah, it's a huge shout out to that university and the way that they structure their curriculum. Um, you do have to take a few prereqs, right? There's a few things but they fit into categories. And you really do have free reign to choose your classes within those. Your first question was, what did I study specifically? I had a major in communication arts and science. Um, and I minored in history, European history, and creative writing. And your next question was like, what was my percentage of I'm interested in that and not interested in this? As I went through school, I got way more interested in the things that I was studying because I had agency to choose them. And even then I didn't specialize. I had a major and two minors, right? I was just kind of sampling and doing lots of stuff. And so the things I was most interested in, I loved the comms curriculum at DePauw. I got to take acting classes. I got to, produce a television show. I got to be a radio host. Um, all sorts of really fun stuff like that. Debate. We had really, really like rigorous and fun debate courses that were, that taught me a lot about communicating with influence and having conviction in something you believe in. Um, and then the creative writing stuff was incredible. There was a professor there. I think he's the chair of the creative writing department now, or English department. Maybe I'm wrong, but his name's Greg Schwips. And he'll listen to this, I'm sure, because I'll send it to him. That guy was amazing. So like I had a couple classes with him, and then going into my final semester, my senior year, he's like, listen, you're one course away from having a minor, but I don't have any room in that course. So why don't you meet with me once a week as a class of one person, and then go off and write, and we'll review it once a week so that you can get your minor. And so that's what I did. Like I would just go off and write for a week and then come back, go off and write and then come back. And I was able to do that. That was one of the coolest classes I've ever taken because it was really just a relationship, one-on-one with a guy I knew and trusted and who really believed in me, and he gave me a ton of confidence. So that was like the ultimate.
So and this, I'm asking this, and this is because there's people out here right now that are like, I've seen this happen before, where people struggle in high school with ADHD and they go to a tech school, or they go right into the workforce and they start using their hands. They're like, man, where was this?
Oh yeah, totally.
Where was this?
Yeah, for sure.
But you and I both were comm majors. I got a marketing degree, and I went into sales. Well, I was an entertainment agent right out of college. And that's
which
a
is
totally
sales.
Different story. Which is total sales, people management. But we both chose sales over not getting to the radio business, which I also was a part of our college radio. I did music bookings, but I chose sales too. So I'm always fascinated when people like yourself say, I love to write, I love to be behind the mic, I love to debate, and then you choose this path. Did you choose that path to be in sales? Like, I want to be in sales, or did sales kind of choose you? Because I've seen two types of people pursue sales as a career: some that have to and some that want to.
I think I was always going to start my career there. I've always just enjoyed it, right? As a little kid, I used to go around the neighborhood with a bucket of rocks and try to sell them to my neighbors. Excuse me. I'm just super social, and I really care about what matters to people. And so selling gets another bad name. Talk about a misunderstood profession. It's one of the most fun ways to be a leader you could ever imagine. If you do it right, you are really just deploying your curiosity and building empathy for your counterpart. And then if it makes sense that they buy what you're selling, you're helping them do it, right? Closing. I used to tell this to people all the time when I would do sales trainings, is like, closing is just a logical wrap to a business discussion. And if it's not logical, then it's not going to work. So, the job is to like learn the other person and pair what your offering is to them. And if it doesn't fit, then don't sell it. But like, that was just like relationship building for me. That was just like friendship building. And so the places I got to do that in my career, just in sales, were really fun, right? I sold luxury high-end real estate in the Baja Peninsula. It was my second job out of college. I sold,
How was living there? I don't mean to take up your track.
It's a great question. Yeah. I didn't live there full time. I commuted back and forth between Arizona, between Phoenix, or my house was in Tempe, our office was in Scottsdale, and Mexico. And it was amazing. I mean, it was just incredible. I met my wife there. She worked for the company. Um, and we were in this incredible setting, but working with incredibly successful people and talented people who had been successful enough in their lives to be able to afford a second home or a primary residence on the beach in Mexico, and who had values that I cared about. We were building a large, sustainable, walkable development in a really beautiful place, and there was a lot of environmental stewardship and community stewardship wrapped into that. So that was like community building more than even selling. But the sales were great. I did a good job at that. I was among our top salespeople, and then later promoted to be a sales manager. And then after that, I went and did the same thing in Costa Rica for a couple of years. Super fun. When the real estate market crashed, um, an investor in one of our real estate projects had an internet marketing firm that he had invested in and asked me to get involved. And so I got into like digital marketing. That's how I got into advertising. And that was super fun, right? Because it was this very ones and zeros kind of like metric driven world, but the relationships really mattered, right? And how you could position yourself with the brands and the decision makers in those ecosystems had a direct impact on the commercial success of the business. And so I was able to drive a ton of value commercially for the business. And then after that, I started starting companies, and I would go through this cycle of like, I'll start something, and if that works, I'll do it for a few years, and then I'll go take a senior executive role somewhere, and then I'll do that for a few years, and then maybe I'll go start something again. And so that was sort of the transition from JT's a sales guy to a more well-rounded operator, executive, founder, and that leads me to the work I do today, which is super fun, right? Like I work in the venture studio ecosystem. You alluded to that a moment ago. Um, what I need to be successful is to be curious about what I'm working on. And I'm deeply curious about what it takes to help young companies make their mark and reach a default alive, the point that they're gonna they've got a platform from which to flourish, and then B, flourish. And venture studios are companies that build companies. So like if a startup wasn't hard enough, right? And I'm sure you've had lots of entrepreneurs, and you are one yourself, you know how hard it is. If being an entrepreneur isn't hard enough, how about companies that build companies, right? The exponential complexity of that. And so that is something I started working on about 5 years ago. And I'm deeply curious about it. It keeps me jumping out of bed in the morning, because the scale of impact that we get to achieve now within the venture studio ecosystem and some of the initiatives that my partners and I are working on there can literally create hundreds of companies and thousands of jobs and really sort of revolutionize how companies are built.
I love it, man. Well, when I left the entertainment business, I racked up a ton of debt, living like a rock star, representing rock stars and comedians and so on. Yeah. And my first job was in technology sales for Verizon. And when I joined there, they always joked about the 3Ds, people get into sales for a divorce, debt, or drug addiction. And I was about 23, 24, and I was starting to come to grips with learning I might have ADHD. And I always added a fourth D to that, which is which is a dopamine hit. And now I look at fast forward to now, sales gives me a dopamine hit every time someone trusts me with their business or what have you. I stock trade, dopamine hit. We got to run a sauna business, and now I podcast. And I realized, oh my goodness, when I started to acknowledge I have ADHD, I started running towards it versus running against it. And I realized all the things that I do from a professional standpoint, even some personal, all have the ability to naturally, get rid of that dopamine deficiency and fill it with a win from a client or win it from success of one of our founders that we take to acquisition or what have you. And let's go deeper into the venture studio thing, because you did allude what a venture studio is, but how does taking all the things we just described that I'm into, you were into sales and so on, but now you get to do sales, marketing, strategy. Like, what are the roles and hats that you wear in your role, and maybe your team does for those kind of businesses? And how does your ADHD like maybe more equip you than others because of the way your brain functions and the way that founders' brains function?
Yeah. So what a venture studio does is it plays three principal roles in company creation: founder, operator, and investor. Right. That's what a studio does. So venture studios come up in the truest definition, and there's shades of gray. And I'm not a real stickler for black and white definitions, but um, a venture studio will assert a thesis, and that thesis will typically relate to some problem that exists in the world that needs to be solved. And it will then launch a series of ventures against that thesis or solving that problem. Okay. And so if you are inventive, which many in our tribe are, the role of a venture studio, or the position that a venture studio in, is incredibly exciting, because you can focus on a problem and then begin to solve it through a series of actions or a series of attempts, and you can learn from failure, and you can get better and better at it, and you can be really fluid in that process, as long as you understand what your target is, right? The outcome that you're trying to achieve. And so what that means is that the people who are a part of the studio are going to inevitably, they're going to have some specialization, some talents that they're particularly good at, right? Like, in our partnership, we have sort of a really great strategic thinker and designer who tends to take on some of that early stage kind of thesis definition and that sort of thing. We've got an incredible operator. I think we're all really good operators, but we've got an incredible operator who's got a background in hitting targets, no matter how hard they are, and kind of breaking them down to bare metal so that we can do it. And then the role I very often play is go to market, right? Is tip of the spear, build community, find customers, find partners, bring the thing out into the world, gather feedback, address that feedback, and make sure the thing is a great fit, and then add scale to it. So that's what a studio does. What we do within the studio ecosystem is a little varied. We have our own kind of semi-studio in the 9.8 Collective, which is a business that we founded together and has launched a number of things that have become their own thing, right? They've become companies. And what I'm working on right now, and it's very timely, the discussion, is actually helping to create a global community that will support venture studios as an asset class on a global scale. And that's a project that is something I'm deeply excited about, because I think that venture studios represent the new way for building companies.
That is so exciting, and I definitely want to unpack that. But I want to go back to something just out of curiosity for me is, do founders, did they seek you out? Like, did they come to you, or do you guys go and seek founders? And whatever the answer is, what is the mixed bag of people like us that have ADHD, people that don't, and what attracts you guys to certain founders to say, yes, come on in, and what are those maybe that you don't attract to as much?
So I've worked with founders in a million different capacities. In the modality that we're in now, in the studio sort of like focus, less so, because a venture studio is founding the company, right?
Gotcha.
They're creating the concept and the design of the venture, and then they're assembling a team of early stage founders around them. So I see fewer inbound pitches from founders than I did when I was doing more like startup consulting work. Now, I still meet with founders all the time, and they're always looking for help, and I've got a soft spot in my heart to help them, because I am one myself. So, uh, in terms of the kinds of founders that am most excited to work with, I think was the question, or that I look, attributes I look for.
Yeah.
Um, Grit, I think, is really important. Um, Starting a company is an unbelievably humbling. I'm laughing just because I know you know this. It's just unbelievably humbling, right? Like things that you take for granted when you had a job. And then you go start your own company, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do and so many things that could go wrong. And it feels like, you know, uh, every single like thing that you would take for granted as almost an invisible utility in a company as an employee are things you have to build yourself. So grit for one, um, curious. I want to be around curious people. I like people who ask me, "Hey, what more can you say about that?" Or "Why did you do that?" Or "I wonder if this," or "I wonder if that." Right? So look for curiosity. The reason I love curiosity is not because I love to answer questions. It's because curiosity is a leading indicator of empathy. And I think founders of anything need to be empathetic to their market and to their employees and to their supply chain. Like that, you've got to be this kind of like tuning fork, um, to kind of figure out the rhythm and vibrations of the entire community that you serve. And so empathetic founders are really important to me. Now, this is not something that I'm even sure is an attribute of great founders, but it is one that I personally love. I like founders who want to go sell their product themselves. I
Me
like
too.
founder-led sales. And I know a bunch of founders who are not natural salespeople. And I'm not saying you have to be a natural salesperson, but I like ones who understand that that's a big part of the job for them. And
So funny.
then I'm sorry, last thing. I like people who have a really diverse background and diversity of thought. I'm not all that interested in hanging out with people who think just like me all the time, because it doesn't move any of us forward.
I love to jump in the mind of someone who does what you do. And I think there's a lot of people listening too that are like, I've never heard these terms before. I've never heard that term. Right. And so if it sounds like
Sure.
I'm kind of going harder in the paint in this lane than normal, is because I think what you do and you do on a daily basis, it's your world. So of course it's like talking to my orthopedic surgeon buddy when we go skiing and something's sore. He's like, oh, it's probably this. I'm curious also. And what I'll tell you is at Reverb, we work with founders that we help them grow their businesses, right? Grow them from a
Yeah.
financial standpoint. And I'm with you on founder led. If I can convince someone to do founder led sales for even a period of time, it's going to help them with any hire
Yeah.
because they know that they've been there. Right. But I don't build anymore like you do. I mean, I've built a bunch of
Hmm.
businesses. Part of the reason why I don't as much is you want to talk humility. You want to know what you're good at real quick and what you're poor at real quick.
Yeah.
Start a business. It was
Yeah.
probably the biggest smack to the face to be like, okay, I'm going to go really hard on these things that I'm good at and come naturally and I'm interested in, and I
Yeah.
need to find someone else. But let's
You
go
got it.
back. You said
Yeah.
you build and then you build the team around. Like how do you do that?
How do you build the team?
Yeah, you said that
Yeah.
there'll be a concept, and it'll be like, all right, then we got to collab, like we got to build the team around that
Hmm.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And I work with a lot of different studios, and they have a lot of different, approaches to this. So some common themes, right? So that I don't advocate for any one given approach. Some common themes are start with the end, right? Targets over everything is the kind of source code that we built into the brand at the 9.8 Collective. Um, and what that means is get really specific and tight about the outcome that you're hoping to achieve or the thesis against which you're operating, right? Begin there. Because otherwise, there isn't an anchor to create gravity around to draw the business forward. And a business is really a group of people, who are working against a commonly defined outcome. So, you know, defining the target, I think, is really critical first. And a lot of rigor has to go into that, right? Because that target has to be worthy of human years. That's the real investment. In venture capital, we talk about what is the amount of capital required. But if we think about it from the people involved, right, it's an investment of human years. So what is the return on human years? And does that return justify, 5 people spending the next 5 or 10 years of their lives on it and then hiring others to be a part of it? And if not, don't do it, right? So like size of prize, right? And so pick targets that are big enough that they create their own force of gravity. We named our company the 9.8 Collective as a reference to Newton's second law of gravity, right? And the idea there is that, if your target is meaningful enough, you will get there. Like water traveling from the mountains to the ocean, it will go over, through, and around. You can dam it, you can divert it, you can siphon it. Ultimately, it's going to get to sea level. It's going to get there. So your question, which I have yet to answer, is how do you build a team around it? Sorry about that. I think when you've got a really clear target in place, you then build a plan around that around hitting that target, and you start with a bite-sized chunk, a minimum viable plan serviced by a minimum viable team. And what that needs to be is a proof of concept that confirms and validates that our thesis is well received by our market. In other words, our solution solves a problem, that solving that problem is valuable, and that there is a scalable community of people out there who are people or companies who are willing to pay for solving that problem. Right? So that's the next piece. And then who do you look for in a team? You look for people who are willing to work really, really hard against that thesis and to learn very quickly and iteratively on the way without a tremendous amount of confirmation bias. That's what I think it takes to build in the 0 to 1. You need people who are willing to be flexible to say, okay, we're committed to the target, not the path. So if the path isn't taking us to the target, we're going to reorient and try something else that just keeps us pushing towards that target. That's what you look for in people. In terms of the disciplines needed, it's best if there's a single kind of leader within the organization who's responsible for all the other leaders and who takes accountability for that. And then I think it's important that you pair the team's superpowers in such a way that they're not directly overlapping all the time, but that they are supportive of one another, that they jive. I really hovered on that word for a long time, and then I landed with jive. That's a technical term. Sorry.
Like, now, is this jive turkey? Because I'm not a restaurateur, but I've heard of.
Yeah, it's a jive turkey is the technical term. That's right.
How many of your founders, and I'm only asking you directly because you can almost, it takes one to know one, come to you and you're like, okay, this person has ADHD? Because I know you do a lot of coaching. You do a lot of coaching for people.
Yeah, that's probably the better way to frame it, is not the founders, because again, studios are often building and then sourcing, like sourcing founding teams or assembling founding teams. But in terms of folks I mentor, that might be a better way to frame it.
How do you help them manage it? Because I mean, it's hard enough, as you know, to try and manage just the day in the life of being an entrepreneur, but then coming to grips with like, hey, I've got this other, and let's say I believe it's a deficiency. You and I do not, but let's say, that just adds another level of anxiety. Is it? I mean, you've figured out a way to manage yours, and are you able to help others manage theirs that are coming into your studio? Or
yeah, I mean, so I'll just sort of frame it a little bit differently. I don't do a lot of like bringing founders into our studio, right? our studio, if you will, is the 9.8 Collective, and there's five of us in that organization. We're all partners, you know, and that's kind of where we iterate from. Um, in terms of how I mentor, what I would say people, right? Successful people who come to me with with challenges with ADHD, and those might be part of the operating team in companies that we help manage or help build, or they could just be friends or friends of friends or folks who have found me through their network who are looking for help. Which is really the question, right? Like how do I help mentor people through this? The first thing I try to do is I try to figure out how this is manifesting. Like what's causing these issues in your life, like in your work life right now. Like what are the manifestations, rather, not even what's causing, what are the manifestations that are causing stress or friction in your life? And then I try to tie those back to things that have either worked for me in the past or have worked for others in the past that I know of that help them to deal with that. So one of the biggest issues with ADD is like we're not great at saying no. So we end up making a lot of commitments, and we get to the place where it's like, gosh, we've committed to too many things. We could never get it done. So I try to help people like with a just a sober look at like what a commitment actually means, right? And with that definition in hand, how many things could you actually commit to? So to me, a commitment is specific to an outcome, right? And the word commitment, like from a taxonomy perspective, has to be greater than circumstance. So it's like commitment greater than circumstance is how I write it in my mind. We talk about it a ton at home. My son told me he was going to get it tattooed on him, and I was like, don't go that far, right? Yeah. But what it means is like, all right, so if commitment is greater than circumstance, that means that if I commit to something getting done, that means that no matter what else happens, it's getting done. It's happening, right? And basically everything else is a circumstance, right? Everything else is a circumstance, and you have to overcome that. Well, if you believe that, then A, you can't maintain all that many commitments, right? You can't have hundreds of them because you won't be able to honor the term. So, you know, we try to like really, really hone it down. What's most important? What's most critical? And can you make a commitment statement to that? And then can you honor commitment is greater than circumstance? The other thing that I struggle with a ton myself, and it's so much easier for me to coach others with this than it is to like do it, is to understand that just because I'm accountable for something getting done, that doesn't necessarily mean I am personally responsible for doing everything, right? So, you know, there's lots of ways to do this. You know, if you're on a team with others, like sharing task boards and being transparent about what your goals are and your targets are is really important. That's something that my teams help me do a ton of. Um, Sometimes when it gets really bad, I do this thing. I write this board out. It's like 4 quadrants, and it's now, not now, me, not me. And I try to organize all the things that have to happen as like, okay, like this one is important, but it is not important right now, right? It's important, not urgent, right? And this is actually something that somebody I work with is actually better suited to get done than I am. So I will work with them and partner with them to get it done. I try to like organize it. All of this is basically a note to write it down and like visualize it and break it down and get it all out of your head. And that will eliminate anxiety. And then the third thing I would do with anybody who's got ADHD is work really hard to identify their superpowers and they're like sort of they're another way to say that is their working genius. I don't know if you're familiar with that program, but Working Genius helped me a ton.
Keep going. Like let's get into that. Because I can see
Yeah,
your smile on your face, and now I'm curious because whenever you have a smirk in your face, I know something brilliant is up there.
so Working Genius was I learned it from a guy in Bozeman named Brian Van Epps. He was a pastor. He is a pastor. He's a pastor at the Big Sky Church, but he's also a professional development coach, and he has a company called Legacy Guides. And so I was lucky enough to work with him on this, and he put me through this Working Genius assessment. And basically, there are 6 working geniuses, and I don't think I'll be able to remember them all, but I'll try. Wanderer, inventor, discerner, galvanizer, enablement, and tenacity, I think are the 6. And what the program says, with pretty high fidelity, like in practice, by the way, is that you can only have 2 true working geniuses. Those are the things that really fill you up. They don't drain your battery, they fill your battery, they charge your battery. Then you'll have 2 that you're pretty good at, and you might even look great at, but they don't necessarily drain or fill, but you're proficient. And then you're going to have 2 that you might be good at, or bad at, but they just absolutely drain you. They absolutely drain you. So that helped me a bunch, because when I figured out what mine were, I was able to like very quickly snap to work that sat in that sort of zone of genius, and added a lot of value to my team. And when I could understand what my team's working geniuses were, I could say, hey, I'm working on something that's going to take me 12 hours and it's going to take you 12 minutes, and you'll do it with a smile on your face. So can we partner on this? And maybe I could take some of this from you. For me, like the big one was invention. I'm an inventor, and an inventor does their best work once the problem has been asserted or the thesis has been asserted, and then they can go to work solving for it. That's where I'm the best. And so I would just, to make this not about me, I would tell anybody to like really lean in and figure out what your superpowers are, and then try to find meaningful work that aligns with that as a vector.
You think that would be a great resource for that? Because, I have so many
totally.
questions in regards to what you just said, because I would love to know what drains you, so maybe someone listening can relate. Like,
Totally. The number one drain for me was tenacity. And tenacity is like, in this particular like curriculum, or vocabulary, is checklist type of operations, like task list stuff, right? That stuff just kills me. Like it absolutely knocks me out. And so that's always been a struggle for me. Or like paperwork, right? Proofreading a document and looking for typos, like that really, really granular administrivia stuff. I'm not. I can be good at it, but it takes a lot of energy for me to be.
The inventor thing, believe it or not, that is something that would drain me. Like when I'm tasked with inventing a solution or something, I like with people that have solutions that they're just not selling or marketing correctly. And then I get, you want to talk about my happy place? Because I can see the future. Like that's my gift. I can be like, oh, here's I know exactly what you're doing wrong. Here's the quickest path to revenue or chink in the armor. But if you said, Mikolai, let's invent this thing that solves this, you would watch me curl up in a corner. That's why I was just curious to see, everyone has those things that don't bring them joy and things that do, and then be able to collaborate with the team to say, the benefit I bring is this, and I will kick butt at it. And the stuff that you're great at is this. So if we can divide and conquer it, everybody feels in your team that we've got a fair workload, right? No one feels like they're getting put out. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it. I think also what you're framing here is a argument for building tribes and community. Don't go it alone. Being a solo founder is super lonely, because there's nobody to turn to when you run into those things that drain you. And so you get stuck in these cycles where it's like, oh, I'm just doing this grinding salt mine work kind of stuff. And so building a diverse team with diverse talent is a really important thing for us as humans, right? For us as humans. Now, some people are just great solopreneurs, so do you. But like for me, the loneliest I've ever been professionally was when I didn't have partners.
And I'm sure you can say you've probably seen some partnerships not go so well either, and there's a little bit of pain
Hmm?
to that. But I think, but for the most part, we can agree that having the right partner, finding the right partner, is the better way to
Yeah.
go if you have the right partner. Speaking of that, I mean, I hate to pick on you because, but you're just a wealth of knowledge. So I'm going to ask you is for those people that are looking to say, I think I have ADHD. I think that I want to be an entrepreneur. I just heard JT and Mikolai kind of allude to maybe doing this myself. Maybe won't be as fruitful, maybe a little bit harder. How in the heck, what do you have any metrics or protocol for finding the right partners based on maybe, these are non-negotiables, or do you have any advice you can bestow upon us for that?
I love the term non-negotiables for partnership. I think that matters a ton. Um, I mean, I think you want to know that your commitments are shared and that there's some alignment around the first principles around what you're building. I think that's really important. I think that the outcome that you're chasing needs to be really well defined. I'll just go back to this like targets over everything. Like, do you align on the core thing you're building? Take the time to really know that first. Do you align that it's important, that it's critical, and that this is something you want to mutually commit to? And then from there, I would say, like, let me move beyond just my affinity for this person, right? Do they pass the airport test is a big one. You guys know the airport test?
No, I cannot. We heard
Would I spend if I got stuck on like a 6 hour layover with this person? Would I just like lose my mind by the end of it, or would I find that their presence actually made that stressful experience better? Would I enjoy that company? Right? I think that matters, and it's one to check off, but it's also important that you're not just choosing to work with people you like. Like, do they actually bring talent, experience, critical thought, grit in ways that I don't, so that this is actually additive, right? Can they create value? Can I create space, or can we create space for each other for them to build value without us being on top of each other is an important thing, right? Um, Another thing I'd look for in a partner. And then it's like just the honorability stuff, right? Like these are like prerequisites. You know, um, we caught one of our kids lying to us about something a bunch of years ago. And I was like, hey, let me just ask you a question. Like, let's fast forward. What are the things you can do with a liar, with somebody who routinely lies? And they were like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, could you marry somebody who doesn't tell the truth? Like routinely? And I was like, no. Would you want to be a business partner with somebody who doesn't tell the truth? Like, no, right? Well, like nobody would come out and say, oh yeah, I shouldn't do that because I'm a liar, right? And most people aren't liars, right? But like, are they willing to say hard truths? Are they willing to give you tough feedback? Are they willing to accept tough feedback? Those are also like attributes of a partner or a co-founder that I would look for. And then there's like the disciplinary stuff. Like when I say discipline, like focus area, like, have they done something like this or similar to this before? Do they have what it takes to do it again? Those are sort of the more like talent assembly kind of things.
It's fascinating. Does your wife have ADHD?
No, no, I think she has OCD.
Oh, we all got something, right? I
Yeah.
asked that because my first business partner, three times over, was my wife, and she does not have it. She was three-time valedictorian. And I always think about that when it comes to hiring.
Yeah.
Like I know for a fact there are people that listen to this that want to learn more about people with ADHD because they don't have
Mhm.
it. And they're either maybe thinking about starting something or partnership, or maybe they're in a hiring position. Maybe they're just at their big corporation to hire people. And now they're learning a little bit more about people with ADHD and wondering if that's a good call. Should I bring on something that has this deficiency, or should I just go, this road? What would you say to those people as far as maybe some challenges of partnering up with someone with ADHD, or hiring someone with ADHD, and or these are the superpowers that you could all but expect and they're worth the risk?
Yeah, definitely hire people with ADHD. Don't look at it as a disorder. Um, Probably best practice is not to ask about ADHD in HR interviews, but like they might even offer it up. So I don't know. Um, you know, th I've answered this question in the past a few different ways, and I'm not sure I've been right because like what I often say is, go to market functions require a near endless amount of energy for social interaction, and a sort of like willingness to hear no and just keep pushing and keep engaging and that sort of thing. And so I think it is true that a lot of people with ADHD are very social and they fit very well into sales roles because of that. But that's not always true, right? It's also true that some people who have ADHD are very introverted. And so, like, I don't want to answer the question with too broad a brush. What I would say is, like, we're a very creative and innovative kind of free thinking group of people because our brains work that way. And so, if you're looking to solve difficult problems, I think that you're going to not, should you target people with ADHD or not, you're going to end up interacting with a lot of them, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to end up interacting with a lot of them, right? If you're investing in entrepreneurs, you're going to end up interacting with a lot of them. And then I think that, the challenge is like, can you give them space to A, find their superpower and B, deploy it without creating too much noise and clutter with it, like along with it, right? And so, I think that's on both parties.
I just asked because, I told you about my first co-founder, which was my wife not having it. And
Yeah.
I think that's the first time she really was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever worked directly with somebody that has this like you
Yeah.
do. And there was some frustrating things. And you nailed it when you said over promising on things or getting way too dreamy, way too fast. It's weird. Like those that can't do teach, when we take on clients, we have a very systematic approach. When I interview,
Hmm.
I talk a lot less than I do in real life, unless I'm in the sales arena or I'm hosting. And so I really got to know. I read the book Traction right after that. I'm like, I need to know what an
Mm.
integrator is and what a visionary is, and I need to know where my strengths fit into these roles and responsibilities. Which is why I bring it up because there might be someone
Yeah.
listening that's never heard of either of those things, and they might be
Yeah.
already in an engagement with a partner and be like, oh, that makes so much more sense to learn more
Hmm.
about those strengths. Are there further books or podcasts or anything that you would also recommend for those people that are listening to this and I resemble that statement. What do I do now?
All right. So the people I'm talking to here, are these the people who are engaging with and managing relationships with ADHD or people with ADHD who are trying to be more easily managed or engaged with?
We got time. Let's just open them both up.
All right. So, all right. In terms of like managing your relationship with people with ADHD, I look, I happen to watch a few people who are incredibly good at it because they manage their relationship with me very well, very
And
well.
you feel that like you could actually that they're doing it. Like my wife had to
I
learn how
sent
to
a
do that and
Slack,
vice versa.
yeah,
But yeah, it sounds like you're a lucky guy.
I sent a Slack message to one of my partners today and said, "I love the way you're leading us." And I said, um, your read on task related stress was unbelievable because I hadn't even recognized it myself that I was letting some things mount up. And he's like, "Yeah, I saw it this week and I wanted to just help you, so we wrote it all down." Right? And I was like, God, what an unbelievable act of kindness. That kept me on track. It kept me motivated, kept me feeling empowered to go build. So that stuff I love, right? Um, Little adjustments that people make to work around things I do that I know frustrate them, but they know I don't mean to do. So like early in our marriage, by the way, my wife's magical. She's a wizard with this stuff. Early in our marriage, I would be leaving the house and she'd say, "Hey, can you do these things?" And she'd rattle three of them off. and I would inevitably get one or two of them done, but not all three. And so just sort of like she noticed it, we talked about it, and she started making me lists. Like she stopped telling me things that she needed help with in conversational sequential order. She would just text them to me, right? That's an act of kindness. I want to help her. I want to get them done. I just can't remember them,
Right.
right? So those little things like that. And then, you know, creating space to praise production really helps people of all types of thinking, but really helps people. So something that happens with ADHD is praise is like God's light. It just feels so good, right? And when you've done something right, it really helps to hear about it. Criticism. So if praise creates euphoria, like that dopamine thing, right? You just walk around with your chest out like, oh, I'm great, right? Um, Harsh criticism creates dysphoria. And you just go into these low valleys like I'm such a failure, right? And so having folks who understand that they can be gentle with their criticism and course correct, early on has helped me a ton. And then, taking time to say, hey, what you just did here was really powerful and meaningful for us. Good job, is also a really nice thing. That's something that I think good managers of any people do, but certainly helps when you're dealing with folks with ADHD.
I love it.
And then in terms of, you said we have time, so I'll riff on this one. You
Keep going. I don't, whenever you take a pause,
okay. Well, you said like we got both. So like in terms of like for people with ADHD, how might you make it easier to be with, to manage?
well, honestly, I have pet peeves about myself that I know exist.
What
I
are
mean,
they?
don't you?
Like what? Yeah, for sure. What are your pet peeves about yourself?
Biggest pet peeves when I get excited, I don't wait for someone to finish their thought, like I have the answer. I mean, I'm just so
Yeah.
excited. And I had a good friend of mine that it was on our podcast. We haven't released it yet. And he goes, we've been friends for 20 years. And so I'll tell you my weakness, but here's a strength. You can't hurt my feelings. Like, don't mess with my Jesus and don't mess with my family. And you could call me the worst names. You could self-deprecate, I don't care. It doesn't hurt my feelings. But when someone says this, it didn't hurt my feelings. It just was something I'm like, I know. He said, he was like, I've always wanted to be really great friends with you, but it's taken so long because I don't get to share a whole lot to you because you hear a thought, and he has ADHD too. And then he goes, but he's introverted. And then he's like, and then I'll just go on a trail and we'll never really get to what we were intending to cover. And that won't be reflected in the podcast episode, but in real life, I hate that about myself.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts. And I
know.
don't know how to fix it.
I don't either. I do the same thing. And I feel awful about it after it happens. Like, I really do. I can't stand first of all, like at family gatherings, I will be like, everybody shut up and let one person talk, please. Please. And so this is an attribute that my family has. We just like are right on top of each other. And we all just jump in. When the thought enters our mind, we just share it. And so thankfully, like the people around us love us enough that they give us grace. But yeah, like we should be better because it's not nice. I do the same thing. It's like, it's interesting. I'm glad I asked because it is my least favorite quality about myself as well. Right. I've done things like put Post-its on my monitor that say, shut up, let them finish. Right. I've also like raised my hand and said like, I'd love to, I'd love to respond to that when you're done kind of thing. And then I just catch myself interrupting people all the time and feel like I apologize for it all day. That's that race car with no brakes thing, right? Like, yeah, it's just.
And compulsion. I mean, that's the other
Mm-hmm.
one that I would hate. And we haven't even talked rock bottoms, and maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. Because I know it's been such a fascinating episode about the business you're in, and you're the one we've had that has that experience. So we may not get to it, but I know compulsion could be my rock bottoms in addiction, trying to just get a real quick fix on trying to
Mm-hmm.
just feel better at that moment, or
Mm-hmm.
over compulsion with over talking, or over compulsion, which I don't I don't want to blame this one as much as the other two I just said, but like sometimes going, I know how to fix that. Uh, you guys wait here. I'm going to go into this lab over here, and 30 minutes later, you're
Mm-hmm.
like, guys, check this out. I think I have it. So I can't say that, you know, the without the breaks is always a bad thing, but compulsion and just overreact, like just woe is me, like or the swings. I don't know if you have
The
those or not.
swings are tough. I think actually what you're relating to though is impulse control.
That's probably it.
Impulse control is just a massive weakness for the ADHD mind, and it's hardest in adolescence.
Can you go further on impulse control? Because when we were talking offline, I had never thought of that weakness in me as an actual like a definable thing. But when you started unpacking it, I was like, oh my, you are speaking my
Yeah.
language.
So the impulse to speak while someone else is speaking, the impulse um, to prematurely um, like disposition something as like good or bad or I'll solve it or whatever are cause friction with other people, right? The impulse to yell out the answer in class before the teacher is done asking the question creates friction. I get those emails, and my parents got those letters, right? So
Right.
that's how old I am. Uh, so like impulse control, I think is the challenge. The But that's like the manifestation on the negative side. The manifestation on the positive side is bias for action. Like we are here to get it done, y'all, right? Like if you've given me enough information for me to solve the problem, why would I wait? Is the way our brain operates, right? And so we don't view it as like disrespectful to interrupt. We just, hey, cool, I already got you. I saw around the corner you were going, so let's move. Let's like fast track, right? And so you know, um, I guess one thing I know that the people I care about and who I spend a lot of time with, I think they give me grace for it because they know it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
But yeah, like those are habits, or not even habits, attributes that are pretty tough for us, right? Because we know that they're not our favorite things about ourselves, and yet we keep doing them. So it's almost like we can't control it.
Can we?
I don't know. I mean, for a time, for sure, for a time, we can govern them.
I always ask, but then I always hold myself back from asking the question of how are you managing that for you? And I don't want to, I almost didn't want to ask because I'm like, I don't know how to manage it for me. Like if you were to reflect that question back to me, I'd be like, you know what? I do the best I can.
I do the best I can. I do the best I can, and I try not to be dysphoric when people give me feedback that maybe I haven't done a great job of it. I
It's
try
fun
to
to
be
see.
thankful for that feedback.
Yes, and I love that you said that.
I
Is
try to be.
one thing I think about our community, the ADHD community, is we can take a punishment, like we can take criticism more than most. At least I can. I can't speak for everyone, because I think we started at a point of deficiency at such an early age. You know what I mean? Like we were already started having to placing a chip on our shoulder to say I'm going to overcome this, that, and the other thing, despite what any of the rest of you are saying about me, whether I understand I have a dopamine deficiency or I have impulse control issues or whatever the negatives of ADHD come. But then I think there might be some good with that to what you said about taking action. My partner Lee at Reverb, we take about 3 to 6 month rapid revenue growth projects on. So inbound,
Hmm.
outbound, all the salesy stuff and marketing stuff that you
It's
need.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
we do intakes, and he's always like, I don't know how you do this, but he's like, you're able to just find the chink in the armor or find the quickest path to growth because we don't have a lot of time. And he's like, I love it. Now, our
Yeah.
offline conversations too, when we unpack this, he has told me many times are exhausting because I figure out this pretty quick when we're in these meetings and I try and control the compulsion. But then when I'm
Hmm.
talking to my partner, my friend, I consider him also, he's like, dude, talking to you after an intake is exhausting because you
Yeah.
just don't shut up. You just start throwing ideas and this and that, and you're already here. And I'm just trying to figure out the first thought you
Hmm.
had, but you're already six thoughts ahead. And
Hmm.
that's something that I'm looking for advice on how to control. Like, can I take a 10-second breath? I don't know when I'm
Yeah.
that excited.
I'm trying to think of like how I would, so write it down beforehand if you can and like stack rank them, or give space for you to work async after. So I was in a meeting today. This was a really good one. And I sent my partner, this was the I love the way you're leading us conversation. So we're launching this really big thing, like a global big thing. We're creating a community around venture studios on a global scale. We're bringing the people together. We're building a big tent for company creators all over the world. We're doing it really quickly because we have gotten massive signal that this is needed and that it is appreciated that we're going in and doing this. But it's creating a ton of like big things that need to happen and then a bunch of smaller things that need to happen. So today, um, one of my partners built a task board, an ops board for us. And he said something that I thought was so great. He goes, "Hey, listen, we're not doing any of this work today. We are writing it down. We're using this space to get all the things that need to happen, the big things that need to happen, and then we can follow on our own time asynchronously with what that means from a blocking and tackling perspective." So you said something that I'm not sure I agree with earlier, which is that you're not an inventor. I think you are an inventor. An inventor is inventing solutions to a problem, right? A wanderer is helping to identify that problem. So maybe if you used that time to say, hey, these are the things that need to happen, let's leave for a couple hours and go write down the things that we think will need to happen for those things to happen, right? And then come back and organize it. You might A, find that that gives you the space you need to do it, and B, it gives your partner time to kind of like consume that stuff.
That's sound. That's
I mean,
sound.
not like I do it all the time, but I'm just saying like that's a thing that might work.
Um, let's take we we've kind of tiptoed around this community, but who listening should be paying attention to that? Like who are you building
Company
for it?
builders. Yeah, okay. So the Venture Studio Forum is quickly being built and launched to help identify and define venture studio as an asset class. It hasn't been treated as an asset class because nobody has properly defined it as one. And despite the fact that venture studios create magnificently productive companies across a broad range of vertical markets and theses, I don't like to say theses because it sounds like feces.
Like poo
So
poo.
theses. I mean, you said it, right? So venture studios, venture studios create magnificent outcomes across a really broad range of scenarios. And despite the fact that the companies coming out of venture studios very often measurably outperform other companies that were maybe traditional startups or traditionally funded or VC backed, and despite the fact that investors in venture studios often do very well, there's this gap, this knowledge gap of what is a venture studio and what does it look like to invest in one and how do I do that? And so we're seeking to eliminate that ambiguity, right? And then bring all of the stakeholders to the studio community, which is studio operators and company builders everywhere, capital allocators and ecosystem supporters, which is a big title for, you know, a couple different kinds of groups. Those could be non-for-profits, governments, research universities, regional development, as well as service providers who want to add value to companies who build companies. So if you're part of that studio ecosystem at all, or you're curious about it, then the Venture Studio Forum, which we're launching, will be a great resource for you. It's a really big deal.
Sounds like you love what you do. Is that fair to say? Do you love what you do?
I do. Yeah, I absolutely love what I do.
How does someone listening find what they love to do? Because I have to tell you, it took me 20 years.
It's such a great question, and one I'm pretty passionate about. So if I ramble a little bit,
ramble on.
well, you've already had me on your show for an hour, so I'm going to ramble a little bit. So there's a great book that one of my partners gave me, and I've been reading it. It's called Range by David Epstein. And the subtitle here is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. So I'll draw on this for a second. Do a lot of stuff. Try a lot of things. Okay? Try to identify the things that you're curious about and passionate about. And the intersection of curiosity and passion is what's most likely to cause you to catch fire and to stay really deeply committed to it. And so this is true for everyone. I think it's really true for people with attention budgeting issues, right? That if we don't do a great job of controlling what we pay our attention to, then we better work on things that we're deeply curious about because they have gravity. They draw us forward. And so I think the way to get there is to try a lot of stuff, do a lot of things, sample. In this book, the author gives kind of two examples, one of a specialist and one of a sampler. And they both got to really good outcomes. The specialist was Tiger Woods. He was raised with a golf club in his hand. His parents said, you are going to be a professional golfer. From age 2, that's what he was going to be. The other example was Roger Federer, who was a world tennis champion and top of his game for a really long time. His parents took a totally different approach. He played a bunch of different sports. And interestingly, when he got too focused or too interested in one of them, they would actually pull him back and encourage him to try other things. Okay? And
I never knew that.
What's proven to be true by the data that's referenced in this book is that certainly specialists can go, excel in life, but I think they have a higher likelihood of working on something that they don't ultimately find meaningful than generalists do. And so I think it's really important to sample, to go out and try a lot of things. And I think, I'll take it a step further. If that's what you're endeavoring to do in your life, then yeah, try a lot of stuff. Volunteer, read things from differing opinions, right? If you're a Fox News listener, listen to CNN and get the other perspective. If you're if you've got your CPA sort of certification and you're a number cruncher, apply that to a bunch of different things and see if any of them strike you as being more curiosity driving. But search for that intersection between of your curiosity and your passion, and I think you'll find really meaningful work. If you're raising a human, encourage, especially one who's neurodivergent or has ADHD, encourage them to try a lot of stuff on, right? And be mindful as a mentor or as a parent or as an individual of the difference between one-way doors and two-way doors. A one-way door locks behind you. So like a face tattoo was a one-way door. I don't have one. So anybody who's got a face tattoo, no shade. You do you.
Mike Tyson? It's all good,
Mike
man.
Tyson. Yeah. So like a one-way door is one that you've got, that decision is with you for life. Two-way doors offer the opportunity to sample. And if you don't like it, leave. Just keep going. keep trying stuff. You can do a lot of stuff, and that's okay. And there's no shame in that game. So, like, if you haven't found the thing that you're passionate about yet and curious about, then keep looking. And if you found it, but for some reason it stopped being interesting or compelling to you, then you're not like chained to it. You get to try a lot of stuff.
When do you think it's appropriate, as I'm listening to you now, following your advice, and I have found I love fly fishing, or I love jujitsu, or flying
Mhm.
planes, or sauning, which we actually did turn into a business. So I guess I should eat
That's
my
so
words. But
cool. Or so
when
hot.
is it appropriate for me to say, I love this? This doesn't feel like work at all. And when is it appropriate to realize, or how do you realize that this is a hobby and it's something you should do for fun? And hey, this might be something that you can do for a living. Is there is there a green light that goes off, or is this just something you say, give it all a shot, and if people will pay you to do it, or what would be your advice for someone listening saying, I really love this. I never thought of it as something I could do for like to make money and
As a
support my
business.
family.
Yeah, I don't know. Um, it's an interesting question because like there's nothing I love more other than my family, um, than fly fishing. It's not my business. I don't have a fly fishing business. My first job was in a fly shop, and I think my last job will be in a fly shop. But in between those, I have not chosen it as a vocation. Well, why is that? Well, for me, so far, I don't want it to feel like work. It's so special to me that if I attached a commercial motive to it, I worry that it might ruin this like really amazing thing. I might
Huh.
be wrong about that, right? Because I know lots of people who work in the industry and love it, right? So I don't know the answer to that. Look, there's some like operating parameters that every human has to know about themselves, right? Like how much money do I have to make, um, to retire or to send my kids to college or to, to make the mortgage or whatever. That like those are those are operating parameters that are pretty important that should align with your search, right? Like if I'm curious about counting the colors on butterflies and passionate about it, but there's not a job out there for me to do that and nobody wants to pay me to do it, that might just be a hobby.
Okay. Touche.
I'll
Well,
bet you that is a real job.
I know that's the thing nowadays with
Yeah.
all the technology, and everything. There's so many jobs that it makes it so it almost gets exhausting. Sometimes you're like, well, that guy runs a fly fishing shop, or that person flies private Cessna planes to
Yeah.
get people from point A to point B, and I love flying planes. Why can't I start a
Hmm.
business? And I've done it both. I've tried businesses that were hobbies that ended up ruining that hobby. Music, thankfully, I used to play. I mean, I was a professional musician. We got paid to play festivals and shows and so
Hmm.
on, but not enough where I would have ever depended on it to support my family like I do today. So it's always
Right.
been a hobby. Therefore, it's always been around. It's still around. My guitars are right over there. I play them in between meetings.
That's awesome.
I just thought I'd ask because I know that you haven't pursued fly fishing that way, and sometimes it's nice for someone to hear that it's okay to do something you love because you love it, and it's okay to use
Yeah, and
skills that you naturally have to do something that you are great at, and then end up loving it because of those reasons.
yeah, to say it's not a vocation for me is only kind of true because it is. I mean, it comes up in a lot of my discussions, and a lot of people who I end up doing work with will engage with me in nature. Like I'll take them fishing or that sort of thing. And that is, maybe like some people play golf in a business setting, right? Or do business in a golf setting or whatever. Like that I do, occasionally. And so like it plays into it. Um, I, I think the question you have to ask yourself is like, how special is it to you? And would you lose joy if it was your job? For me, it's like the core of my spirituality. And so if I had to change the way I went about my day on the river to make money and it became more transactional and less sort of spiritually grounding for me, I would probably not be very happy about that, you know? Whereas, like when I take people fishing and they catch their first fish or they learn how to cast a fly rod and I see them light up, that's all the payment I could ever ask for. You know what I mean?
That's why I asked. I
Oh,
mean, I do
right
know
on.
what you mean,
Cool.
and I've
Yeah,
been on both sides of that. But I just want to make sure that some listener out there hears that, because you got to tread carefully too. You got to have things that you love to
totally.
do there outside of work. Um,
Yeah.
so I have one more question left, but before I get to that, I want to just ask you: is there anything that I did not ask you, or there is something you were hoping to talk about today that I didn't ask?
Not at all. I love the conversation, and I would have it forever, right? And maybe we will. I hope we will. It
Well, we
seems
will do
that
this
way.
again. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, no, I mean, I think, look, I want to be a resource to people who feel like they've got that this is challenging for them. And I love really that you've created this venue for that. So, you know, I would put it back to you, right? Like, did we not go deep enough on anything? Or was there anything that, like, maybe I didn't give a more, a thoughtful enough answer on in terms of trying to help people? But no, I think it's been great.
Well, and to be fair, I have my final question, which you know what it is, which is 14-year-old JT, 12-year-old
Yeah.
Nikolai, what would you tell that person? But to be fair, I think that you have covered that we've talked. It's been a crayon box of discussions, a lot of it to do with business, but we're both
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, and we have entrepreneurs that have ADHD that have overcome the special needs room to create success in our life, both of work and balance, personally and professionally. So I guess that's the final question. Other than where can we find you and support you? I'll obviously leave with that. But is there any advice you haven't covered today for a 12-year-old Nikolai, 14-year-old JT, somebody raising us, or somebody in that position right now and just trying to figure life out,
Yeah.
discovering what they have and how to maximize it? That's the question. Any parting words?
Yeah. Yeah. So, gosh, I mean, so many of it. So I have an 18-year-old son and a 13-year-old son. So these are live discussions anyway. Um, find what you're passionate about and curious about, right? So many people on the planet don't know that. And they may not know they don't have it, but they're missing joy because of it, right? That's one. Two, have a lot of fun. Like truly go have fun. Enjoy your life. Cultivate joy in yourself and others. Lift people up. Your KPI is if people are smiling around you, you're doing something right. That matters more than anything. Okay. Three, give yourself a break. Failure is on the critical path to success. Learn from it, embrace it, and get back up and go, because that's like you're gonna fail a bunch. And when it happens, you can't become dysphoric for too long. Learn from it, take it earnestly, take it seriously. Be self-aware, and try to hold back in social settings those impulse control um, elements that cause you to take words away from other people. Let them finish. Let them speak. Ask them questions. Get them talking. You'll be happier. They'll be happier. And then a couple of other, like, sort of parting shots that were advice given to me by my parents that I would carry forward. Um, it's almost never as good or as bad as you think it is. It's somewhere in the middle. And you probably have more time, so don't panic. There's a huge difference between worry and preparation. Try to worry less and be more prepared. Get out in front of things and prepare, check them off, and then carry forth and have a joyful life. That would be the advice I would give my kids
Beautiful, man.
or myself.
One thing that I will add to it as we close out is, listeners, the last thing is, if you have ADHD, or you know someone that does, or you're raising someone, or you've got one branch, finger on a branch with ADHD as a whole, understand that you are not alone, and you never will be. We have a
No.
prime mission here to make sure that we are going to build a community, and we're going to have these conversations. So you get to know incredible people like JT, that have what you have what I have, and you're not alone. don't ever convince yourself that you are anymore, because you're not. And speaking of that,
No, most certainly not.
speaking of that, with your community and handles or resources that people can get to know you better or people can support you, JT, what are those?
Yeah, thank you. Just echoing that, right? If you're struggling, um, call one of us or somebody you know, or another one of your guests. Yeah, you do not have to go through. You do not have to go through this alone. Alone is not a thing. There's a community around you who wants to support you. In terms of how to reach me, you know, I make a pretty active commitment to post on LinkedIn, and to share my thoughts on business there. I keep the other social stuff for pretty personal connections, right? So I'd start there. I'd start with LinkedIn. If your interest is business related, if you're interested in the venture studio ecosystem, um, my company's website is 9point8.co, 9point8.co. And the Venture Studio Forum is venturestudioforum.org. We're presently preparing to launch that, so I'm easy to find in those two places as well. And otherwise, you'll have to find me on a river somewhere.
I'll be right next to you. Hey,
Perfect.
thanks again. Well, first of all, JD, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, to bestow your knowledge. This was fantastic. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed it too. Please go support JT, get to know him. He's a fantastic guy, and he's become a fast friend that we've just kind of created a bond and brotherhood. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share Radio on the Drum with your friends. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and we'll be growing that out. Share it with your friend for those that may need it, or someone that might just want to listen to some entrepreneurial ADHD knuckleheads. We'll have more conversations like this. JT, thank you, brother. Guys listening, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.
Thank you.